A sore point, a touch point for people when it comes to new properties is defects. Defects when building a unit block, defects when building a house, 1 year, 2 years, years past. Let's talk about that process. We've got the best builder in the house to talk with today. Stay tuned. Michael Vance is coming as well. Cheers.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Morning Minutes. Myself, Michael Bergio, Mark Novak, Michael Vance here, episode 428. You can't build what we're talking about today is defects, and something someone said to me really resonated, especially when it comes to new builds or anything really built by hand, is you can't build the perfect building, but don't judge the builder on that. Judge the builder on how quickly and swiftly they come back to rectify, and judge it by that, because nothing is perfect. And there's no one better to talk about it than Michael Vance, who builds pretty close to a perfect building.
Thanks, Michael.
But Mark, so this is probably one of the biggest complaints when people, it's just a very touchy area. People get really emotional. They may have waited for that apartment for 2 years, and there's always shit that happens. It can be little stuff like the top of the tap's not on, or it could be big stuff that the bathroom's in the wrong place, which I think's happened before.
Or the building's falling down.
Yes.
In Homebush.
Yeah.
But you know what? Thanks for joining us today, Mick. A big thing about this is that it's a real roadblock in people's mind. It's a real stress point for people where it's just this unawareness. We haven't done it before. We're not sure. Should I not? And we thought nothing better than to have a guy that's built a lot of volume. So just to qualify Michael, I think, Michael, just the last couple of years, hundreds and hundreds of units in DY you've built, and what's gone wrong and how people come back. It's really, really important. I think at the moment, with stock levels so low, people are turning to new properties, and the biggest stress on their mind is defects. Is the building going to be okay? Is it going to cost me money? Am I going to be okay? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, Michael, how does it work? Because everyone always interrogates us at the beginning of what's the warranty, what's this, and so what can a homeowner expect to sort of be wrong in an apartment, and then what can they expect to be the turnaround time to get things fixed? Are they waiting a year? Are they waiting a day? Sort of, what's your experience of how it works?
Yeah, so I wouldn't expect that anybody would be waiting a year to get a defect fixed, as long as there's reasonable access and the builder's able to attend to the defect. But ultimately, like you mentioned at the start of the program, it's a handmade product. So ultimately, you've got lots of people with their bare hands putting together products. Not like a factory floor where a robot's putting it together and it's within an eighth of a millimetre every single thing that gets connected and put together. So you've got to expect that there are going to be some defects at the end of the job, but it's managing those defects and it's how the builder / developer performs in doing that, which is ultimately what the purchaser wants to know. So when you're purchasing off the plan, for example, you would hope that any developer and builder would be allowing you access into that apartment prior to settlement to do an inspection. And this is a visual inspection. So you're going to go through and look at everything visually. You might turn on some taps, you might flush the toilets, you might turn the oven on, you might even go and test every GPO to make sure that everything's all right, which in theory they should be doing in any case. But you as the owner are probably going to have a keener eye than the builder that's been staring at the 100 or so apartments for the last 2 years building them, and you create a bit of a list. You'd want to be able to give that list to the builder, and you'd want to think that they go and attend to those defects prior to settlement. In my experience, when I've been delivering buildings, I would generally go down that path. So a couple of weeks before settlement, get the owners in, have a walkthrough, create a final list, and from the building team, they would have gone through and done their own list and fixed their own defects. But then we get the owners in, they would do a list. the aim would be to rectify every single thing on that list prior to settlement, and get them in for a second inspection to basically tick that list off. There could be things outstanding, like, for example, if you had some joinery items that had a lead time, you might have to wait for those. But what we in turn do is the owner might get worried about that. So what we would do is then just to create a clause in the contract to say this defect has been identified prior to settlement, and we're committed to fixing that. So that forms part of the contract document. So they've got that in writing as part of their sales contract, and then we'd be committed to fixing it. Then, assuming you get all your defects fixed, you settle, you move into the place. Once you move in, those little nicks and scratches are a lot harder to suggest that it's a builder's defect, because you've moved all your furniture in there, you've had removalists, other people in there, and you're probably going to create damage yourself. That just happens. But you're going to start using everything. And when a building starts functioning fully, while testing individual units individually or progressively through the project is one thing, but have a full occupation of a building and then people start to use everything, you're more than likely you're going to find some things that are going to come up. And it's a matter of having the builder having the right systems and mechanisms to enable you to report that defect and then them to attend to that defect. And I don't think it's fair to think that every time you have a thing go wrong with your apartment that a builder's going to show up within 2 hours to fix it. But you'd like to get some acknowledgement, you would think, within 48 hours, even if that's as simple as an email saying we've received your complaint or your notice of a defect, and we've got it and we're going to book in a time to come inspect it and resolve it. But you just want to have that communication, because there's nothing worse than reporting a defect and then hanging there for nothing for days and weeks on end waiting for something. So ideally they're going to be letting you know, but ultimately you just want to have some kind of understanding of when you're likely to hear from someone, and it's just about communication more than anything else. And builders need to be they need to be tending to defects, especially the builders that are constantly building apartments, especially in the same area, because ultimately they are their biggest critic, they're also their biggest fan, and they're going to promote them throughout the area as well. So it's in their best interest to fix the defects as well.
And I think a buyer will, even the whole sale process could be perfect. They love the unit, but let's just say the PowerPoint in the spare bedroom didn't get attended to for like 3 weeks. That can put that whole sour taste on the whole process. And basically, as you said, especially if the builder is doing something in the area, someone could ask them, how was it? And the whole process up until the last week was perfect, and they're just like, it was shit. It took forever for a defect to be done, and it's just like, So it's almost more important the last couple of weeks, because that's what a lot of people remember. And I think defects reminds me of the word boarding house. It's an ugly word. For a lot of the time, it's, as you said, it's by hand. It's almost like a little human error, right? Because when I hear defect, I think faulty, broken, rather than didn't put the screw in, or didn't put, basically like a little human error at the beginning. So it's really just managing the expectations as well, and reassuring people it is something very simple that can be addressed.
Yeah, and I think that people got to really, really remember that there's maybe 100,000 properties being built in Sydney in that year. Often in media, you are hearing the bad situation or the bad, do you know what I mean? That what resonates is not what the good people are doing, but what the bad people are doing in media.
100%.
So, it's important that majority of the guys out there, more like 99%, are actually doing a great job. But a question that I've got is, as a purchaser, what can a purchaser do to be sure and to have that assurance? Like, in the journey of a purchaser looking at buying a property, from the builder's perspective, if you were buying a unit,
yes,
what would you look for if you going, okay, well, I've decided to buy new? What are the hallmarks or things that you watch out for to say, no, I'm not going to buy that unit, or I am going to buy that unit? And how should a purchaser act after they've bought that unit? Like, what are the tips
The tips are that you need to do your homework on who the builder is and who the developer is. Look at their past projects. I've been on the program before and mentioned that. But more importantly, when you're at that point where you want to commit to the contract, you get a contract to review. I would be asking questions like, what are the builder's pre-settlement and post-settlement processes? So what processes do they have in place that go through what I just explained? So do you get the opportunity to inspect the apartment before settlement? Do you get the opportunity to write a defects list? When will that defects list be attended to? And once you move in, what support do they have for the owners and the occupants of the building beyond occupation certificate and getting completion? So that you have a clear understanding prior to buying or signing up for the property of what they are going to do to service you and look after you as an owner.
Because there are going to be defects. There are going to be defects.
That's a great
question.
Ask the question.
So ask the question about what services are provided by the builder and or the developer. Pre and post settlement on your property.
Yeah, that's what Luke said. The builders pre and post settlement inspection process is super important. Yeah, very important. And
they're very important.
I think a reverb on the speaker. It's coming back on us.
Okay, I'll turn it down a little bit. And I find a big thing was what you just said there. That just had about the processes, because we've had projects where you can definitely tell the difference between an experienced operator and someone who may be doing it for their first or second time when it comes to that process. Because I'm just thinking back in some developments, even when people love the idea of a boutique development, but this is another thing I've realized as well, when the developer is not the builder, because a lot of the time, especially when it comes to like defects, you may be liaising with the developer, but because they've got the builder in as a third party, once the building project's finished, they're sort of off to another project, and they're a little bit harder to get back there when they're not the same people, because that third party builder may not be getting the complaints from the buyer, and they've sort of got that layer. They've got that person in the middle protecting from potentially the angry buyer. But I find when it's a really, really nice synergy when the developer is the builder, or a family together, or a big company. I find it just flows very well for that.
Can I expand on that?
Certainly.
What is the difference between a developer using a different building company, and what is the difference between a developer also being the building company, i.e. Meriton or someone like that? Can you explain that?
I would. Ultimately, on paper, it's more or less the same, but the difference is that they got an ongoing relationship if they're one and the same company. So they would be separate on paper, but they're owned by one and the same entity, and they're going to be working consistently with each other. So I would have more certainty around the developer builder rather than the developer with a third party builder. But in saying that, the same sort of things, the same processes happen, the same legal requirements are on both parties, no matter whether they're linked or not. So in theory, it shouldn't be the same, but in saying that, if they're working together consistently, I think you'll get the same result.
Yeah, because a great builder, third-party builder, can make an inexperienced developer look good, because that builder has got those processes down pat, and the developer could be turning around, oh, I didn't even think of any of that. Luckily, I pointed you guys, and they're like, yeah, because we just do this. We're always building for people, so they know that process. Where if you actually get an inexperienced developer builder, it can be, I think it comes back to what you just said, Michael, experience. What's a way to I always advise clients when they go, well, what are their past projects? And you're showing them these beautiful images of the projects. I always advise my clients, just go to the building and knock on a few doors and just say you're looking to buy within the building, because best trick. Yeah, because anyone can make anything look good on paper. Like I've heard developers they like, especially with architects, they get one architect to do like the shell of the design of the building, so they've got that brand name, but really it was another architect that did the body of it. So there's a lot of ways everything can be manipulated or made look good on paper, but I think nothing beats getting down on site on physical past project and have a chat with them that way.
Yep, absolutely. Happy days. Any other
I
questions?
think that's a wrap. That's a wrap, and appreciate you coming on, Michael. It's always good to have you on.
No worries, good to see you.
Mate, you're a legend. Thanks so much for doing that.
You.
It's awesome. And I think it's a lot of, again, if anyone's got any friends or family that are thinking of buying new, this is good. It's good thing to share.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, gents. Cheers.
Thanks, mate.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Bye. Oh, hang on. I got to get the video.